Hi, I'm Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. And previously, I've done a couple of videos about tapped lands and untapped lands and some of the options around that. Originally, it was 5 things that Magic players should stop doing when playing Commander in a way to try and improve how they and their friends around them have fun. And most of them, the 4 out of the 5 things, were relatively well received. The 5th one being play less tap lands led to people accusing me of hating poor people. I don't hate poor people, I just hate Magic players. Can you blame me? I did make a follow-up clarifying my position and talking about some budget options that are coming to play untapped because people were claiming that you needed a $800 loan to build an untapped mana base. But I thought I'd clarify my position one more time before we go into today's video. Succinctly and clearly, here we go. If you play less tap lands, you get to play your spells on curve. Outside of 4 or 5 colour mana bases, you can get away with cheap budget options that can utilise basic lands and even mana rocks. Tap lands should be, at their best, looked at like developmental stage of the game early on and utility. Taking a turn off early in the game to cast a Signet or a Cultivate or to play a tap land is perfectly reasonable. Doing that in the mid to late game just means you are doing very, very little compared to the rest of the table. Whilst it might not be explicitly clear, it might affect your enjoyment of the game. And I'm not just talking about being competitive here for here and winning every single game. It can be that you just might not have fun if you aren't casting your spells on curve and falling hugely behind your friends. In short, playing less tap lands will make your games more fun. However, I do acknowledge that not everyone has infinite cash or huge collection of Magic cards. I do acknowledge that some ETB lands are pretty good. So, with all that said, multiple people asked me, which tap lands do you play, Vince, and which tap lands do you think are good enough? So, as part of the EDH 101 series, where I look to give people some ideas, some food for thought to help new players or help people getting into Commander to enjoy themselves, I'm going to talk about my 6 picks, my top 6, because everybody loves a good fucking list video. My top 6 ETB tapped, Enter the Battlefield tapped lands. This series, looking to give food for thought and dispel some myths around Commander, is brought to you by Skillshare. They reached out to me to help sponsor some of my videos, helping others get into the world of hobbying and gaming. Skillshare is an online learning community for curious people looking to get started, dabble, or even master many a pursuit. They provide classes by industry leaders and experts on topics ranging from music production through to graphic design to video editing. So whether you're looking to brush up an existing skill set or improve your professional talents, Skillshare can help you with that. I am personally using Skillshare to help improve how much I understand and know about Photoshop to make better thumbs for the channel. And whilst I'm getting better at it, sometimes I do still make some real nightmare fuel. I find Skillshare helpful in developing my abilities as a content creator. Time can be really precious whilst I'm grinding out content to satisfy the overlord known as the algorithm. So being able to find the resources I need and without adverts is amazing. There's a link in the description below. The first 1,000 people to click it get a free trial of Skillshare, and then after that each month is less than $10 a month, which is 1/5 of the price of a Walking Dead secret lair. Right! Let's talk about some tap lands. No top 6 list would be without some honourable mentions. We have 2. The first of which is the Karoos, as they're colloquially called, the Ravnican double mana lands. These things can be good. I play a Simic Growth Chamber in Tatyova, and I think in certain decks it can be really good. In Tatyova, for example, it wants to hit landfall triggers every single turn, not only for Tatyova herself, but for other cards in the deck. So putting 1 back into your hand is actually an upside to allow you to make consistent land drops. In addition to that, if you have more land drops from things like Exploration or Oracle of Moldire effects, then you can replay the bounce land immediately. Weirdly, this double mana producing land is probably at its best in green decks that can abuse the multi-land drop effect. The big downside to be aware of is that if you play one of these, and you put a land back in your hand, and then someone strip mines you, or wastelands you, or even ghost quarters you, it's gonna hurt real bad in terms of putting you back. Like, really bad. I love doing it to other people, but you don't want to open yourself up to that unless your deck can really abuse the bounce land. Hence, why it's an honourable mention and not in the set list. The second honourable mention is an honourable mention because it's kind of a trap. Creature lands. Lands that become creatures for a mana investment, often ETB tapped, Mutavault being the exception. I currently have Lumbering Falls in my Tatyova deck as one of the ones I need to take out. This has been in the deck since I built it, since Tatyova was spoiled and released and I got one in Dominar pre-release and started playing her as a commander. And honestly, in all that time, and I played a lot of Commander with her, online and off, I don't think I've activated Lumbering Falls as a creature once. And with Tachova, I'm playing the upper reaches of power levels. I'm not really playing on a budget as I have a huge collection of cards, but I'm still playing it, and every time I draw it, I shake my fist at the sky and shout, "Damn you, lazy Vince!" Because I'm just too fucking lazy to go back and change the deck between games. I think the card's literally quite dog shit. However, creature lands do have their place. I have won games with Rafik of the Many, for example, post-Wrath, where I've fired up a creature land, even a Celestial Colonnade back in the day, and equipped one or two equipments to it to wreck someone's face, get some triggers, and do some damage. So in some decks, it's pretty good. I think Lumbering Falls is actually pretty good in Rafik, but I think it's pretty terrible in Tachova. So again, it's very deck specific. In at number 6, we have the most obvious inclusion on the top 6 list. It's the Triomes for Midkoria. Whilst this is obvious, I still think they need to be included here. These fix your mana very well, being a tri-land, similar to the Shards and Karn's lands, but they're fetchable and they can cycle. On the fetchable side of things, you can prioritize them early on by fetching them with fetch lands to minimize your chance of drawing them in the late game as a tapped land. You can also grab these not only off fetch lands, but you can grab them from Farseek or Wood Elves if they're a forest version. And then the fact that you can cycle them later in the mid to late game if you're beginning to flood helps to offset the potential downside of coming into play tapped. Look, if you're on a budget and you're building a 4 or 5 colour mana base, I wouldn't pull my nose up at playing the Alara and the Karn's tri-lands. The Ikoria lands are strictly better in almost every single way. Almost every single way. Of course, they enable opponents swamp walks and forest walks and stuff. So the Triomes are the best fixing tapped lands, barring one other on this list in my opinion, because of the amount of utility and extra fetchableness they have. In at number 5 is everyone's favourites, it seems, and I really don't like them that much, is the Scry lands. They just about make it onto the list. To be honest, now that I'm reading it out loud, Triome should have been number 5 and these should have been number 6. But look, it's not like I can produce these things and edit them, okay? Once I speak into the microphone, that's it. It's done. There is no technology on this earth that can change spoken audio and edit it. It's just not possible. I don't think the Scrylands are good enough in every deck. If you aren't playing on a budget, then I think you should be cutting these, honestly. I think the ETB Scry is good in certain decks, especially like mono white, mono red, and red white decks. Of course, you can't play these in the mono decks, but I mean decks that are leaning heavily towards one colour or the other, because you don't have access to the card selection and the raw card draw of blue, green, and to a lesser extent black. I like them, but again, if you're looking to play your spells on curve and reduce the number of tap lands, Scry lands probably get cut before anything else on this list. In at number 4, we have another card that I'm playing in Tachova. That's my gold standard, even though I am playing some of the shit honourable mentions. I'm playing a Lotus Field in Tachova. It enters the battlefield tapped, forces you to sack some lands, but then it gives you a land that taps for 3 mana, and it's hexproof, so it's not getting Ghost Quartered or Wastelanded like the Karoo, the Ravnik and double lands I talked about earlier. Keep in mind that there is a little bit of downside to this. The land taps for 3 mana of the same colour each time, so if you're trying to cast a Child of Alara, it can be rough on your mana base. But beyond that, I love this card in Commander. It synergizes very well with a lot of green commanders as well, which is the best colour in Commander, obviously. Gitrog loves this as he gets to draw a card when you sacrifice lands, and anything that cares about lands in graveyard, that's things like Life from the Loam, Crucible, Round of Excavator, Night of the Reliquary. The list is endless. And if you can make extra land drops out of the bin using this plus, like I said, a Crucible effect, you're loving life. Number 3 is the most competitive of the ones on this list, barring perhaps one other a little bit further up. As in, if you're playing at CEDH level, or we can play in a competitive Eternal format like Legacy, you will see this land from time to time. Bojuka Borg is the greatest Enter the Battlefield triggered utility land of all time. That is a bold claim, I know, but I'm gonna go out and say it, and I'm gonna stick to it. It's hugely playable, and in Commander, sometimes exiling someone's graveyard will all but take them out of the game. Its flaw is that it does nothing. It's an ETB tapped, only producing black mana land. That's its flaw. But its ceiling is that it loses someone else the game at the table. It really is that powerful, honestly. If there's a pesky little anger in a graveyard somewhere, nuke it. Or a sneaking suspicion that your opponent is trying to set up a living death, you fucking got him. The only real problem with this land is that, weirdly, it's a tap land you want to hold on to apply it in a later turn, like a spell. So where most tap lands reward you for dumping it early, you want to sequence it early so it's untapped for the rest of the game, this one, on the other hand, requires some more reservation, tact, or strategy. That said, in decks where you have access to crop rotation, or Night of the Reliquary, or similar effects like that, Bog goes from being good to absolutely amazing. But it's a utility silver bullet, essentially. There's a trend here that basically green makes everything better. But in short, focusing on what we're talking about, play Bog. Bog is great. At number 2, we have a card that many of you will probably have expected to be at number 1. It's Field of the Dead. This land is fucking absurd. It spams tokens and heavy land-based strategies that can make multiple landfall triggers return, or return lands from the graveyard more consistently. Alternatively, it can just be a free value train over time, generating you 1/2/2 creature, or even 2/2 creatures off a fetch land randomly. When I say randomly, it's not random. Just by playing out your game plan of playing multiple lands that have different names. And those bodies can go on to block shit, they can be sacked to sack outlets, or even, heaven forbid, you try and close out the game by attacking. Probably the best land printed in a decade, maybe more. And then finally, in number 1 is a pet card of mine. Perhaps it's not as good as being number 1 on this list. That some of you can tell me in the comment section if you disagree. But I'm going to give number 1 to Path of Ancestry. I fucking love this card. It's your second copy of Command Tower at the very worst, but it enters the battlefield tapped. That alone would make it a perfectly reasonable inclusion in a budget option for decks that are trying to play 3 or 4 colour. But if you're on a tribal strategy or a heavy creature-based strategy with a common creature type with a commander, this card will pay for itself over time. The land produces 1 mana of any mana colour in your commander's colour engine. But remember, you don't have to spend that mana on a creature. It says there's an upside for spending on a creature, but you don't have to. It's 2 separate sentences. So basically it fixes your mana, but then there's upside. If you cast a creature that shares a creature type with your commander, including your commander, you get to scry 1. So just casting your commander alone, it's already better than a scry land. If you cast 2 creatures, let's say you're playing Rafik of the Many, and you cast Rafik and then Eternal Witness, that's 2 humans. Bazinga, you've scryed twice. I can't believe I just said Bazinga. I need to stop saying that. That was ironic. It just didn't sound it when I was reading off the script. God, I hate myself. Cast a 3rd thing that shares a creature type, and it's just huge amounts of card selection. And if you're in tribal strategies, like I said, it's insane. It's a bit of a pet card for me, but you can really easily see how it's far above and away better than those scry lands. A bit worse in the early game because you don't get it just for playing it. You have to cast things off of it. But in the late game, it's amazing. So did I miss anything? Are there obvious inclusions that I didn't put on my list? Or is one of my inclusions, in your opinion, complete dog shit? Let me know in the comment section below what you think. If there's a tapped land that I should have included in this list as a pet card for you that has overperformed for you in the past. A big shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this video series ongoing. Don't forget the link is in the description below to try out your free membership. And until next time, be good to one another. I've been Vince, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.